It's exactly 7 in the evening and it's time to unleash something and on. Hello and welcome to Techy Talks podcast. We are your hosts for today. I am Shella and together with me right now is a special co-host and she is...
Yes, it's me, Ella the Great, and I'm so ready, Shay. Are you ready?
I'm so ready, Ella.
How about our listeners? Are you ready to amplify your lives?
Because it's time to unleash it out.
It's time to turn up the dial on new discoveries. Yeah, hedonism, technology, and evaluate your choice.
If you want to live with more realizations, experience more freedom,
Freedom!
more fun,
If you're ready to squeeze the juice out of every area of your life, then
it's time to unleash a lot of aha moments with us.
you know what? I miss times where life was much easier when apple and blackberry were just fruits. I mean, what do we really think? Imagine life without the Apple's iPhone or the BlackBerry that has been a hallmark of most people around the world in the last decade. Life without a mobile phone, computer, the internet, and the many other gizmos surrounding us, it certainly seems difficult to say the least.
Yeah, I still remember the evening when we sat down and spoke about how things used to be before we started writing letters mostly by email rather than the conventional postal mail. It brought back memories of painstakingly writing the letter where the kind of paper selection was almost as crucial or critical as the contents, going to the post office, purchasing and affixing stamps, double checking that everything was in order, and making sure that the receiver's address was correct. Then came the email, simple and fast.
Yeah, so much for that. I have a question for you, Miss She. Are
Yeah,
you
go
ready for my
ahead.
question?
Sure.
Okay. So my question is, what is something beautiful for you?
Oh, let me think. Hmm. I believe that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It depends on the perspective of the viewer, but I'd say that things with minimal designs attract me. I prefer things to be simple as they are.
Mhm. Wow, beautiful answer. But you know what? Someone said that whenever we look at something beautiful, a certain area of the brain gets activated, thus going against the age-old adage that beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. Nay! Beauty is not in the eye of the beholder. Hello. It is in the brain of the beholder and in a very specific part of the brain. When people look at something they find beautiful, a portion in the front part of the brain called the medial orbitofrontal cortex lights up. That is, there is an increased blood flow in the area. Moreover, viewing art triggers squirts of dopamine, a feel-good chemical in the orbitofrontal cortex of the brain, resulting in feelings of intense pleasure.
Wow, interesting. I never knew that.
Now you know, right?
Yeah.
But it's sad for me because I miss the old times when life was pretty simple. But I guess change isn't bad at all. Because through technology, people are more picky and careful with their choices. Technology is not simply about being useful, it must, at the same time, appeal to the user, right? So, for today's
Yeah.
episode, we will focus on how technology, which has been traditionally associated more with a manufacturing output, is becoming increasingly involved with our affective processes, including feelings and emotion. With our podcast title today, episode 6, Technology and Hedonism.
Okay, so I have a question. Does beautiful technology act as like a ploy for attracting more and more people toward it?
Uh, Ploy. At some point, the physical structure of smartphones and laptops make it clear to attract to the users. Technology must not only be functional, but it must also be beautiful.
Fair enough. Most of us have gone through such experiences when we went shopping, not because we needed something, but we're looking for something interesting, something novel, and Something about which we could boast our confidence?
Oh my god, you're definitely correct. Technology cannot be considered to be simply a means to help us achieve our desired ends. These objects give us pleasure, others frustrate us. But the pleasure or displeasure seem to vary from person to person. Now let's talk about pleasure or your question about happiness. Do you know that there's a scientific study of the principles of pleasure which we can call hedonomics? However, economics and hedonomics differ in a sense that the former helps individual to maximize wealth, which is economics, while the latter aims at maximizing happiness, hedonomics. So, for example, a person that loves wooden blocks becomes bored while playing the one he has for a while. So, how can we make him happier? A solution from economics? Acquire more blocks. While the solution for hedonomics, you learn to combine the blocks in new and more satisfying ways.
In addition with your points, Ella, let's proceed to cognition versus emotion. Let's try to give an interrelation between the two. So, cognitivists have generally felt that emotion should not only be considered independently of cognition, but should also be seen as a deterrent to efficient cognition. Ever since then, the role of emotion has been given a back seat and has been seen as the black sheep that spoils rational decisions. Also, clear thinking would be possible only if emotions are eliminated or at least kept under control. And I would like to add up a theory that we called bounded rationality, which proposes that since we base our decisions on available information and not on the complete information, we can never be completely rational then.
Ah, so that's what bounded rationality means. However, Michelle, is satisficing itself really and truly rational? Because if this were so, every object should be considered only because of its practical utility. You know, we should buy and use gadgets only because they help us to fulfill some goal. But even when we have one mobile phone, we tend to buy another one or long for another, right? This excitement, this mood, this feeling goes hand in glove with the cognitive appraisal of the object's practicality, clarifying that decision making is based on both cognitive and affective aspects. The two are in fact intertwined to the extent that it may not be possible for the scientist, leave alone the lay person, to tease out differences between the two.
Yes, Ella, and generally speaking, to every object, there would be both an emotional response as well as a cognitive response. So when we say emotional response, this refers to the feeling of pleasure or displeasure regarding the object, and cognitive response refers to the meaning of and knowledge about the object.
And now, since we're done talking about economics, let's proceed to what we called ergonomics. And let's try to differentiate between ergonomics and hedonomics. I'm sure everybody is excited to listen to our next topic. But before we delve deeper on that, let's define first, of course, what is ergonomics. So, ergonomics is the study of how tools and equipment can be designed taking human capabilities and their limits into account. There are actually three important targets of ergonomic design, namely safety, productivity, and operator satisfaction.
Correct, Ella. According to Jordan 1998, he stated categorically that if there are emotional benefits accruing from the use of the product then will lead to pleasure. On the other hand, if there are penalties associated with the use of the product, displeasure results.
Yes, and we can also understand the difference between ergonomics and hedonomics by using Maslow's theory of motivation as an analogy.
If technology serves our needs, including our hedonistic orientation, how does it fit into Maslow's theory, Ella?
Simply put, technology is a tool that serves our basic physiological and safety needs. We store our food in the refrigerator to keep it from spoiling and construct houses for safe living. However, when a 3-year-old baby says that my phone is my buddy, but it helps me to talk to my mom, technology is serving our love and affiliation needs. The needs served by technology can be understood as existing in a hierarchy consisting of 5 levels. Similar to what Maslow, as I've said earlier, had proposed for needs in general. Now, according to the authors of the model, it said that in ergonomic needs such as safety, functionality, and usability would be at the bottom of the pyramid, and the hedonic needs such as pleasurable experience and personal perfection would be at the top of the pyramid. Welcome back to another episode of Techy Talks with episode 6.2 entitled Hedonomics and its Importance. Our previous episode welcomed us to the idea of what is technology and hedonomics. Now for tonight, I'm giddy and excited about what we will be talking about. We will discuss importance of hedonomics to make sense of why we are talking about this stuff.
Someone so amazing will be joining us, Ella, and I'm very thrilled to introduce to you and to our listeners a renowned alumna whose major was psychology and now a professor teaching courses in psychology like psychology of technology and industrial and organizational psychology in University of San Jose Recoletos. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Miss Angelica Alas.
Thank you very much, Stella. It's my pleasure to be here talking to you and our listeners right now.
A lot of people are new to the topic, hedonomics. Some have less idea of it, while others are fully unaware of it. So, why is it important to talk about this?
Oh, that's a good question to start with. Okay, so with reference to other technologies, we seem to have moved from mere ergonomics to hedonomics. We give both pleasure and usability importance. According to Hasenfeld 2014, satisfaction with the product is maximal when there is an interplay between the usability of the tool and the extent to which it is considered beautiful. Together with ergonomics, which focuses on the reduction of pain when utilizing tools and making it comfortable to use, and reducing fatigue to enhance productivity, we also considered the pleasure one can derive from the beauty and attractiveness of a technology, which is called hedonomics. Using a variety of gadgets makes us happy, right? Well, frequently, we experience and get the feeling of being lost in time while on it. In a study of Sackett and co-workers 2010, they found that the subjects experienced that time had passed so quickly that they did not even realize how much time they had spent interacting with technology. And this affects our time perception, which refers to our subjective experience of the passage of time. So, for example, when you're engaging in tasks such as listening to enjoyable songs, doing research on a topic that interests you a lot, talking to a person you love, or watching your favorite movie series, time seems to pass so quickly, and dopamine spurt occurs too. This is a sudden surge in a dopamine, a neurotransmitter which tends to get people excited.
Wow, that's an interesting game, Miss Angelica, and a load of information.
True enough, but we're not done yet. This time, let's talk about Barbara Fredrickson's Rodin and field theory. Basically, she posed that when people experience pleasure and joy in the use of tools and technology, they will be far more productive in all life endeavors than when they find the tool useful but nonetheless not very pleasurable. Also, she classified 5 positive emotions, namely joy, interest, love, contentment, and pride. Positive emotions are worth cultivating, not just as end states in themselves, but also as means to achieving psychological growth and improved well-being over time.
What an interesting theory, Miss Angelica. I think an emerging field in this direction is that of positive technology, which is based on the theoretical underpinnings of positive psychology propounded by Seligman and Csikszentmihalyi, and claims that technology can not only foster learning and learning experiences, but also promotes psychological, emotional, and social well-being, which is the aim of the field is to investigate how information and communication technology, also known as ICT, can be used to improve the quality of personal life.
That's correct, Miss Shella. Now let's talk about the impact of hedonomics in the marketing of products. Whether we think of the eternal sin committed by Adam and Eve, the negative libidinal energy talk about by Freud, or the positive psychology emphasis on the positive emotion. Pleasure and happiness have always been crucial for mankind, and technology is, after all, only a means to an end, or a tool that can produce either pleasure or displeasure. And companies are now more willing to spend more on the designing of beautiful products rather than just utilitarian ones. An example would be you may use any knife to cut vegetables, but if it is beautiful one or in a fancy color, your desire for owning it and using it increases manifold times.
Uh, Actually, Miss Angelica, I came across a research by Naomi and Mustafi, if I'm not mistaken, and according to them, customer satisfaction is related to customer purchasing behavior, feelings, and impressions. And a customer's purchase decision is dependent on the satisfaction of two types of needs, namely functional needs and emotional needs, right?
Yeah. Yes, that is why it is imperative that distinct positive emotion arousing elements be introduced into the product to make it preferred by the customer.
Wow, that's so informative, Miss Angelica. So, anyways, I've heard about these two designs that companies now utilize to, in order to market their products. Can you tell us more about this as well?
Sure. So, hedonic design, it is a design devoted to pleasurable human product interaction, which tools evolve much like living beings, right? And as far as tool designing is concerned, there is a progression from concerns for safety and functionality to that usability and pleasure. We have also affective design, a design that intentionally created to capture the user's attention, triggering an emotional response that will increase the likelihood of performing a certain behavior. The simple idea is that it should draw your attention in a very big way, and that is most easily done by arousing some sort of emotion, whether it is joy, curiosity, fear, or anger. An example would be the beeping in a car to fasten the seatbelt can cause annoyance, increasing the likelihood that the person will fasten his or her seatbelt to make the beeping stop.
I've been curious about achieving hedonic design, and so I've done quite a research about it. Well, you also did, Ella, right?
Yeah, this topic got me hooked.
Very timely. Okay, I'm gonna go first with what I found. While psychology has long focused on the performance of a user, that is, the capabilities to master the operation of a tool, current research has shifted to the responses of the user who evaluates a gadget. There are varying types of pleasure one can obtain from technology. Khalid and Helander 2006 have developed a simple categorization consisting of 5 types of such pleasures. So first, we have the physical pleasure, and this is gained through our sensations. And then we have social pleasure, which is a pleasure gained because it enhances social status and relationships. The third one is the psychological pleasure, which is a pleasure gained because it caters our interests and even results in its prolonged use. Then the reflective pleasure, which is a pleasure that caters to our thoughts about the technology. And lastly is the normative pleasure. This pleasure is gained because it helps us fulfill social norms and enhance our social values. So yeah, that's pretty much what I found.
Oh, you've done a good research, Mashallah. However, the problem with a simplistic classification of pleasure like that is that it fails to take into account the fact that our experiences of pleasure are very personal, and their interpretation often varies across cultures. Also, the expression of pleasure seems to follow cultural patterns, and each culture sets some limits on the expression of pleasure.
Right, that's true. Pleasure is, I guess, too complex to be classified in a very simplistic manner.
Actually, there's a model called technology acceptance model, which has been developed for achieving hedonic design. Basically, it suggests that the positive relationship between technology and its use can be examined in two ways. So these are the to what extent would be the technological device enhance humans' performance, which is the utilitarian aspect. So the thing here is that if people perceive that the use of technology would improve their performance, it would lead to the fulfillment of one's intrinsic motivation, which would diminish as the utility of the gadget reduces. And another one we had is to what extent would it be possible to free oneself from effort while trying to master the technology, which is the hedonic nature of the relationship. So, intrinsic motivation based on perceived enjoyment of a gadget or effortless usage leads to its prolonged use. So, what leads to an intrinsic motivation to cling to the old tool is often because of the fewer mental resources needed to operate it. So, we have this concept called anthropomorphizing. So this is the tendency to ascribe human features to other living beings and even lifeless objects. For example, computer users' habit of talking to the computer and treating them as if they're real pals or living beings. That's it.
So, do you guys know that arousal level plays a part in this matter as well?
Interesting. Tell us more about that, Miss Angelica.
Well, according to Trevor Van Gorp of the Affective Design Incorporation, this relationship between products and people is based on three factors. First, we have the pleasantness of products, which refers to its attractiveness and ability to make people feel good. Second, we have the usefulness of products, the degree to which it serves our need such that it demonstrates its worth over a period of time. The range of needs may vary from material to spiritual in content. And lastly, the usability of products, the degree to which it is easy to use and its operations are easily understood. One can intentionally attract the attention of prospective customers and enhance the arousal level. This enhanced arousal level will in turn lead to other psychological processes such as thinking and emotions and will decide how the customer reacts to the product.
In relation to that is the flow and Yerke's Dodson law. So flow is described in the work of Csikszentmihalyi 1990, which says that the experience of being completely absorbed in whatever one is doing, basically. And then on the other hand, Yerke's Dodson law says that optimal performance, I guess, yeah, it's performance, is achieved at moderate levels of arousal. Too little arousal causes boredom and so does not lead to flow. Similarly, over arousal causes anxiety, which is again, a distraction to our cognitive system and so reduces our interest and intensity of attention to the task at hand.
Very much so, and there are levels one must consider in designing technology. First, we have the visceral level. It is based on physical features such as shape, color, look, feel, and sound. Second, we have behavioral level, which focuses on the function and utility of the object after we like the look of it. And third, we have the reflective level, which focuses on what the gadget means to the user apart from its functional use.
Whew, that was so informative, Miss Angelica. Thank you so much for that very insightful talk. I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot from you, and so are we. Right, Miss She?
Yeah, I did. With deep gratitude, we'd like to thank you for your time tonight, Miss Angelica, and for sharing your expertise with us. You can reach her out, guys, on her social media accounts, which we'll be putting on the description box below. Once again, let's give her an applause, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Techy Talks podcast.
Welcome to another Tech Talk podcast. For tonight's episode, we'll be having the factors that need to be considered to create emotional appeal in a product. But how do we combine all these factors? How do we create a technological marvel that will attract each and every person who looks at it?
To simply put, it is an ideal situation for effective marketing and sales that would make a product more pretty, easy to use, and valuable.
Tonight is a very special episode for us because we have a very special guest. We are so lucky to have her for this episode despite her hectic schedule. She is a well known designer of her generation. Please let us welcome to Techie Talks, Miss Roslyn Asingua. Hello, Miss.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for that overwhelming introduction of me, Ella. Yes, you're right. Tonight, we will be talking about the overall features of a product, its appeal, effectivity, practicality, and how the product appeals to the senses of the consumers. But first, I will introduce to you the two perspectives of a technological product. First, there is the designer's perspective, which focuses on the appearance of a product and its utility. Second, there is the user perspective, which would in turn involve three aspects, namely the perceptually induced reactions, expectation induced reactions, and lastly, the intellectually induced reactions.
Wow, that was great, Miss Roslyn. But for now, we will proceed to tackle the affective user design model. So the model is based on two sets of variables, namely design variables and user variables, and the relationship between these two.
Yes. First, the design variables, which there are two systems which are distinct, and yet the designer will have to interrelate the two in order to create a gadget or a tool or even a technology that serves its purpose and at the same time appeals the consumer. The first system, namely the designer's environment, consists of three factors. First, the artifact, next, the context of use, and lastly, the society trends. The second system is a true highly interrelated system of cognition and emotions, from which each is being influenced by a whole host of factors such as culture, gender, age, curiosity, aesthetics, and sometimes peer pressure.
What we're talking, Miss, is that the task of the designer is to match the previously mentioned and create something that will satisfy all the aforementioned factors, by which customer needs are studied through detailed market research processes. Yet, by the time the product is launched, customer needs may change, often because of some competing technology or product.
Yes, Ella. To achieve this, a semi-structured interview is done. We use a series of semi-structured interviews to arrive at the hedonic considerations of certain product. This is more likely wherein we calculate the advantages and disadvantages of a product, and it aims to outweigh disadvantages more. Kansai engineering pertains to the psychological feelings and images generated in a certain product. It is one of the methodologies developed by companies like us yearning to stop dropping sales for effective or emotional design. Kansai engineering focuses more on the appearance of the product to design a product which gives pleasure to the consumer. On the other hand, Citarasa engineering focused more on the needs of the consumers, the emotional intent and aspirations. Starting point is a description of customers' needs rather than description of product properties as in Kansei. So let's go back. The Kansei engineering is more focused on the physical appearance of the product, while Citarasa engineering is more focused on the needs of the consumers.
The relationship between the design and the choices made by an individual are far more complex than one envisaged. One may design an object that has all above mentioned characteristics, and yet when it enters the market, we find no takers for it.
Why is this so? The reason is that besides emotional aspects that attract us to the object, there are other whole host of factors that determine our final choice.
Yes, you're right there, Sheila. In general, people prefer or tend to approach simple, familiar gadgets and dislike and avoid their unfamiliar, complex counterparts. Approach behavior is associated with pleasure while avoidance is caused by pain or fear. To explain further, Desmith has identified 5 types of emotions that products could arouse in us. First, the instrumental emotion. These are the things that help us achieve our goal. For example, we use cell phone or laptop to use for our online schooling or work. Next is the aesthetic. It appears like pleasing to our senses. The appearance. Which one prefers? Is it touchscreen, keypad, and so on and so forth. The next is the social. It is gadgets that enhance our status. You wanna appear fancy? You'd probably go for the latest model. Next is a surprise, or it is a very special and different type of gadget. It is different from the rest. How the product shines from the other products which are somewhat exactly the same. Lastly is the interest. These are things that cater to our hobby. Features of a product like camera, games, and the apps it contains. In general, people prefer or tend to approach simple, familiar gadgets and dislike and avoid their unfamiliar, complex counterparts as what said before. Just like when we buy a new phone, we opt for the brand that's more trendy and well known.
Thanks to technology, we are living in a world full of choices. With a plethora of cars, motorcycles, or computers, it becomes harder to select a product than when we were offered only a limited number of choices. This explosion in consumer choices has been studied by psychologists recently with a view to assess its impact on the behavior and mind of the users.
Having a choice implies a sense of control over the environment. Just like how when we go to buy a car, we do look for engine power, petrol consumption, tires, etc. But we also get attracted to new shiny things. Imagine our choices for cars 30 to 40 years ago and compare them with what we find now. Greater variety, shapes, and colors, all making rational choices far from easy. Yet we keep craving for greater variation, expecting them to arrive at faster and faster rates during our lifetime.
Our choices may not be the same before and now, right? Just like before, we go for bulky phones, but the trend now is that the thinner phone, the better. There are already a lot of better choices, but it still varies from person to person.
On the other hand, the positive side of enhanced choices is that it could lead to an increase in reaching an informed decision. After reviewing many products, a consumer is definitely more informed than the one which he or thinks is the best.
With the availability of choices and knowledge of products, people will be able to reduce the probability of making risky decisions by eliminating irrelevant features of a product. Finally, an increased number of choices could contribute to the development of self determination.
So when a teenager is commended for his choice of a gadget, he is likely to say it was my choice. This connection with technological product evokes positive emotions such as joy and empathy.
Consumers are less happy when someone else makes the choice for them regarding a product perceived to be unpleasant.
Wow! Because of me! So we have learned a lot from tonight, and yes, we should be careful enough when it comes to choosing what's best for us. But before, we were just choosing and choosing and choosing what we think is beautiful for us, but we didn't realize that it has to go through such processes.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing your expertise with us, Miss Roslyn.
You're very much welcome. It's been my pleasure to be here tonight with you.
All right, thank you. I think that's all for tonight, and we will see you next week for another episode of Techy Talks. Have a great night ahead. Goodbye.
Good evening, everyone. We are down to our last episode for the Techy Talks podcast, which talks about the hedonomics and cognitive biases and the application of hedonomics.
This time, I will introduce you to our lovely speakers we have tonight. So please open your ears and minds as our bright, interesting speaker is about to give you an informative talk. They are one of the successful business women working in the industry for more than 10 years. Wow, 10 years. Our dear listeners, our two guests for today, Mrs. Sofia Fernandez Ruiz and Miss Mary Samantha Than. Let's give them a round of applause, please.
Yes, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for that, Miss Ella. We are happy to be here with you guys, right, Miss Tan?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Miss Ruiz. We are so happy and honored to be here. Thank you so much, dear, for inviting us for your last episode. So today, we will be tackling first the cognitive biases, and first we have the prospect theory by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in 1979. An important part of prospect theory is that individuals tend to favor options that offer a perceived gain, even if the outcome is just the same. In other words, they favor one option because it is framed in a way to make it seem like it is a net gain. So next, we have the attribution theory that has been proposed to explain how individuals judge people differently depending on what meaning we attribute to a given behavior. One good example is when someone is calling you multiple times and you may think he just wants your attention. Next, we have heuristics. These are straightforward rules of thumb that we develop based on our past experiences. They are cognitive tools that helps us make quick decision or judgment. At some point, we didn't notice that we are using different cognitive biases in our daily life encounter. Next, we have the fundamental attribution error. It is the tendency for people to overemphasize this positional or personality-based explanation for behaviors observed in others while underemphasizing situational explanation. It is like when a student does something good like turning off the computers in the laboratory that are not used, then the teacher would assume that he is a good boy, not because of an external situation like a teacher is telling him to do it. And we mentioned there the situational and dispositional bias. So what are these two? Situational bias is the tendency to put blame on situational factors rather than on the individual. And next is the dispositional bias, which is the tendency to put the blame on the individual. The projection bias is a self-forecasting error where we overestimate how much our future selves will share the same beliefs, values, and behaviors as our current selves, causing us to make short-sighted decisions. For example, if you're satisfied with your car now, you will neglect good car deals in the future and regret not looking into them more closely when your car is damaged. Next is delay rationalism. which refers to the weight of a consumer gives to feelings versus reason in the decision-making process. Next is the media maximization, a bias which makes us prefer objects which serves as a medium for receiving a desired outcome rather than its immediate outcome.
Wow, that's a lot of information, Miss Tan. Thank you so much for sharing knowledge and expertise to us and to our dear listeners.
It's my pleasure to be here talking to you guys.
Yes, indeed, this podcast will not be possible without our speakers. So we are done with our first speaker, and now we'll be listening to our second speaker, Miss Sofia Fernandez Ruiz.
I will be sharing with you applications of hedonics consisting of e-consumer behavior, online gaming, online music services, technology for the differently abled. These topics will aim to clarify how hedonistic concepts have been applied to various technological fields. So first, let's talk about e-commerce. As we know, the number of internet shoppers has been steadily increasing. In reality, e-shopping has become a win-win situation for both buyers and sellers, with the latter no longer needing to maintain a large physical inventories or large staff to manage brick-and-mortar shops, while the former have the convenience of making purchases from the comfort of their couch, rather than having to brave the perils of driving, particularly in less than ideal weather. An example of e-commerce are Amazon, Flipkart, eBay, Lazada, OLX, Shopee, Zalora, and etc. Next, I will be talking about online gaming. An individual plays a game in order to enjoy and have fun, right? It goes without saying that there are periods when economic factors far outweigh hedonistic ones, such as in professional sports, but they must usually include a fun aspect. Now, let's talk about emotioneering. Emotioneering is the process of making a live audience experience, interpret, sound, smell, and see your message or story. It seems like they are part of something even though they are not physically there. Next would be online music service. Online music service is the emergence of online music service providers exemplifies how one technology drives another. You can download music on the go, sometimes for free. This has resulted in a proliferation of online music service providers. An example of best online music streaming services as of now are namely Spotify, Amazon, Tidal, and etc. Lastly, let's talk about technology for the differently abled. The management of one's life and day-to-day tasks is a big challenge for differently abled individuals. Although moving to turn off the light can be painful or even difficult for others, just like how the ringing of the doorbell is meaningless for those who are deaf. With the advancement in medical research, human life expectancy is growing, resulting in a new category of older people who will need assistance. Next is the caveat. Through the passing of times, we humans have been cautioned against extreme pleasure, which can also be equated to desire. Despite the fact that it can provide pleasure to the user, their production and distribution must be limited. Too much of something is unpleasant for the consumer and has negative consequences. For example, using computers in online games may bring happiness to the child who is playing it, but it may not be good for his eyes or even his wrist. In this sense, a radically new field called eco-hedonism, which means keeping a balance between beauty and ecology, then sustainable hedonism, which means maintaining balance between what humans like and what is sustainable. And the name implies self. The aim is to strike a balance between what we want as humans and preserving ecological balance. What are Braungart's hope for the future? He has already founded a business. Apia, who has trademark venture, is cradle to cradle, or what we can call C2C. This C2C technology that helps in the recovery of raw materials used for product. For example, did you know that even Nike, the world's most well-known sporting goods corporation, produces C2C certified shoes? A more futuristic concept is that products should be leased rather than bought. With the producers expected to return them, the reasoning goes that if producers realize they'll have to return their goods, they'll start using better materials.
Wow. Thank you so much for that, Mrs. Ruiz, for your very informative talk.
Thank you for our curious listeners as well who stayed with us all throughout our podcast series, Technology and Hedonism. This has been your host. I am Shella.
And I am Ella, signing off. See you tomorrow.